Hello again. I'm back. I'm here once more to do a whole lot of yapping, a whole lot of talking. Well, hopefully not that much because I don't want to keep you here too long. But I am here and we're going to talk about something. I tried to record something earlier today, but over my weekend, I got really tired. So I did like 10 minutes of footage. I recorded a good amount of content, and I was just stuttering on every word. So I had a really strong cup of coffee, and I'm here, and I'm awake. I'm gonna try to do this. So today I wanted to talk about one of my first workplaces. Today I wanted to talk about one of my first workplace experiences when I worked at an Irish pub as a dishwasher. Now, if you've ever dishwashed, you know that it is not a complicated job, but there's a lot of gross stuff that you will need to learn and do and manage. I remember my first shift, which was it was surprising about my first shift because I was going in there expecting to do dishwashing, right? But I remember going in and I stood there for 3 hours just putting nachos into bags. And after that, my back was killing me, and I was like, I don't know. No, it wasn't nachos. It was cheese. I was putting cheese into bags. That's what it was. But I was there for a while, 3 hours, putting the cheese into bags, and I went home. Anyways, while I was dishwashing, I had to do a lot of, I guess, kind of gross stuff. That's something that I really appreciated about the job, is that it will desensitize you to a lot of gross stuff, like cleaning out deep fryers, scraping the oil into the bins out back, cleaning in the sinks, cleaning. Okay, the worst one is that, so for anyone who hasn't worked in a kitchen, usually the way it works, at least in my dish pit when I was there, is that the servers will come in with their plates, they'll put them on a rack, then you take the plates off the rack, you spray them down with the hose, and all that food falls off the plates to a grate underneath a rack that will slide into the dishwasher, and then they'll get washed and you put them away. So after a long shift or a long night, there will be about like an inch and a half of just scrap food on the bottom of this drain, this net, whatever it's called. And I used to be like disgusted by it. When I first started, that was probably one of the worst things that I had to do because it was so gross. It is so nasty. You're talking about gum and chewed up bits of food and lettuce and tartar sauce and beef and just everything you can imagine that would be really, really gross. And I used to put on like gloves. Like first month, I was like, ew, putting gloves, like, oh, reaching my hand in and, pulling stuff out, throwing it in the garbage. And then a few months, I just didn't care. I just did not care. A few months in, I was just like raw dog and bare hand in there, in the dish pit, picking this stuff up, throwing it in, just completely desensitized to the fact that I am shoving my hand into like the most disgusting stuff that I've ever seen. I know that sounds really gross, but it is actually something you will come to appreciate, or I appreciate it, because now there's pretty much nothing I won't touch.
You better get your mind out of the gutter.
At least, like, if I have gloves, like I'm not gonna pick up dog poo in my hands, but there's pretty much nothing that I won't pick up and throw away. Now, another part of dishwashing for me was learning to balance and task manage. I am not an organized person. My brain is all over the place all the time, jumping from one thing to one thing to one thing, from one thought to one thought to one thought to one thought. It is all over the place. So for me, dishwashing was a good first step towards learning task management and organization and figuring out task priority as well, figuring out what I have to do, when I have to do it. Because when I first started dishwashing, I would just stick with like one task, and I would focus on that one task for a long period of time, and everything else builds up. If you just focus on putting dishes in the machine, none are being put away. If you just focus on scrubbing in the sink, nothing is going in the dishwasher. So it was a lot of running back and forth, trying to figure out that fine balance. And you get there. I got there. And that was probably my first step into figuring out task management and task prioritizing. If that's the right.
I don't know if that's the right word.
But yeah, that was probably my first step into organizing myself a little better. So for context, when you are cleaning the kitchen, at least when in my kitchen, there were a few sinks. Usually I think there's like 3 sinks in a kitchen, maybe more, because I think my pub was a little on the small side. But there was a sink closest to the dishwasher, and all the chefs and cooks would throw the pans in there. Then there was an empty sink in the middle and a sink on the far right. And that far right sink was used for cutting potatoes and food and whatever. It was basically like dirtiest on this end, cleanest on this end. So this dirty sink would fill up with like bits of cheese and beef and anything else that didn't come off on the pan. So I would have to stand there scraping that stuff. Your hands get super oily, super nasty, and it was. But you got used to it, like the other thing, like the grate on that one side. I got used to that. Now the far right sink is where I really had fun, because our pub had hand-cut, house-cut fries. If you ever hear the term house-cut fries in a restaurant, it doesn't mean that there's some guy like me back there with his knife and he's just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, next potato, 1, 2, 3. That is not what's happening there. So what I would do is I would take a large cutting board, place it on the middle between those 2 sinks. Then I would take my knife in this hand, a big box of potatoes here. I'd spray them down with the hose, and I'd take this knife, and on the wall there was like a fry cutter, a hand crank. So you would lift it up. Think of like a potato masher, and it has that grate at the bottom, right? So I'd lift up that crank, and with one hand and my knife, I'd stab a potato, put it in there, and I'd close it. And after a while, I got so good at that I was the fastest person in the kitchen. I think at one point I cut like 7 40-pound buckets of fries in an hour, and that was something that I was proud of. That was something that I did well, that no one else in that pub did. Obviously, it's big whoop, you're cutting fries, right? But I was proud of it. I liked it. So yeah, cutting fries was a fun process. It was speaking of fries, I have cooked a lot of fries, and the crazy thing is, people who have been in that industry way longer than me, like, it is unfathomable how many fries you will cook if you ever work in a pub or a restaurant or anything.
There's so many fries.
It is actually,
It's a little bonkers, actually.
it is a lot. Now, another thing we used to do is emptying out the deep fryers. And okay, funny story. When I first started, I was asked to empty the oil pots. Now, if you don't know what that is, or how a deep fryer works, or cleaning the process, it's usually there will be deep fryers in the kitchen. That's where all your deep fried stuff comes from, right? And the oil pots is where all the old oil goes. So you open up the flap underneath the deep fryer, and there's a nozzle there, and you turn it, and all that oil will drain out into these metal bins, right? So when I first did that, somebody had asked me to go take the oil pots out or clean them. And usually we would just take them to the end of the restaurant, cool off, and then we would go out back across the parking lot and dump them into this bin, where it's supposed to go. But one of my coworkers, when I first started there, and this is actually crazy to me, I still don't know how this came into this man's head. But he told me, with no experience, to dump the oil pots into the sink. So I dumped a huge pot of oil into the sink with all the crap that gathers on the bottom. And I spent like an hour and a half cleaning out the sink. He didn't care. He wasn't upset. He after I did it, he was convinced that was still the right way to do it. This is like, it is hard to understand how you could work in a kitchen and think that is the right course of action. Because from what I knew, he had been there for a while. So I don't know. It actually, I talked to coworkers after he got fired at some point, but I talked to coworkers after that, And they were surprised. They were shocked at how stupid that was. How idiotic that was. All right, but yeah, that was pretty bad. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about before I go is if you ever work in a pub or a kitchen, you will realize very quickly that there are some really, 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 really stupid customers out there. I mean, like, stupid or just greedy money seeking people or cheap people, right? They don't want to pay for their food. So one night, we have this dish. It was like, a slab of fish and some vegetables and whatnot. It had seasoning on it. So somebody orders this fish and we cook it up. They send it out, and we're still going through orders, whatever, are rushed. We're going through it, cooking everything. And the server comes back and they complain with a complaint that the food was too spicy. And we're like, okay, the food is too spicy when it's just seasoning on a fish? But hey, you know what? The customer's always right, right? So they go back out and they want a new order. And they come back and they say, all right, they want hot wings. So they sent their food back saying it was too spicy and then sent an order in of something that was known to be spicy. That is the whole point of hot wings. If you are going to lie and try to get free food, can you at least use your brain and try to come up with a better excuse? Please. Because the worst part is that we still did it. We still gave them the food. That is the crazy thing to me. That was crazy to me. We still made it for them. That like we are straight up we are straight up being robbed of our food here. And we still did it because the customer is always right. That was really something. Now, the other crazy thing I wanted to talk about was this menu item we used to have called Buffalo Bites. Now, these Buffalo Bites were essentially battered mushrooms and kind of like a southern fried batter. So, they come with buffalo sauce and ranch. So we get an order of Buffalo Bites in the kitchen, and we throw them down and we put them up in the window. And a server comes back. She's like, all right, thanks, guys. I have a quick question before I serve this. And we're like, yeah, what's your question? And she goes, do these have any mushrooms in them? And I remember just like, there's like 5 ingredients to this. It is mushroom, flour, and spices. Like 2 or 3 spices. It is literally just a battered mushroom. And the server comes back asking if the battered mushroom, where it says on the menu, battered mushroom, has mushroom in it. I don't know what's worse. The fact that somebody allergic to mushrooms ordered battered mushroom, or the fact that the server had to ask before she brought it out. That was a can I have an omelet with no egg moment. That was a little hard to believe. Anyways, that's all I really wanted to talk about. Already running a bit on the long side here. I'll try to edit some of this stuff out. Hopefully, this was entertaining. This was good. This was a truly epic experience. Epic story time. I will upload something tomorrow, maybe.
Have a spectacular day.